It's a tale of high adventure, treasure, monsters, kingdoms won and lost, and nobody can seem to agree on the origins of this work, where it came from and who actually wrote it. Was it oral tradition that begat the work, or a lone monk locked away in a monastery? We don't know. Drama within and without, the tale has a lot more to it than who wrote it, which is why I'm making a case today for the possibly Old English epic Beowulf. Welcome to A Case for Classics, the podcast where I try to talk you into reading, for fun, those works of literature that maybe you've come to associate with homework and book reports. They might exist on a master curriculum list somewhere, but that doesn't mean they aren't valuable as entertainment to the modern sensibility. This is the last of the early episode recasts, at least for now. I may revisit other episodes in the future, who knows. After this, we'll start on our Pulitzer Prize-winning works, with a slight break at episode 100 to talk about Charles Dickens, which I'm really looking forward to, by the way. After all of that, I'll be back to my nonsense, being a little renegade in what constitutes a classic, and by that, I mean we'll be talking Ian Fleming, Agatha Christie, Arthur Conan Doyle, and the usual injection of horror classics. Because I can. Before I begin, I just want to say up front, even though I do say it in the original script, I freaking love Beowulf. Like Dante's The Divine Comedy, I've read it several times, read many think pieces on it, and it just makes me so happy. It's something that I can read and feel all at once a sense of awe and a sense of hilarity, because this is a book that, I think, is best enjoyed by modern readers with their jabbing senses of humor fully aimed at the work. Don't be afraid to poke fun at Beowulf, making anyone who stands still long enough listen to how great he is. Yes, the monsters are great, and the ending is a little sad and a bigger picture kind of thing, but come into this with a light heart, and you'll enjoy it more, I promise you. And with all of that said, let's get started. Today's case was always going to make it to the show. I love Beowulf, but it got pushed to the top of the pile because I started seeing articles popping up around the internet that showed new debate concerning the work. For years, scholars have relied on the accepted fact that Beowulf was written sometime between the 7th and 10th centuries AD, or the 8th and 11th centuries AD. That's two different time blocks from two different sources. It was a long time ago. I forgive them if they can't nail down a few centuries exactly. But the accepted fact was that it was written at about that time by an English monk in a monastery, which has always struck me as odd. The characters in the book are Scandinavian and Danish, and the English have never been shy about writing tales canonizing heroes from their own country. Why write this amazing poem that's over 3,000 lines long about a foreign hero? We can theorize about the history of Viking invaders all we want, but it's still a strange move from the English. That's all I'm saying. So, some studies have been done on Beowulf, trying to find out, really, who wrote the poem. Was it a single author, or was it a collaboration? One study determined that it was a single author, that aforementioned lonely monk, apparently thinking up fantasies in his cold room in the monastery. I have no idea if that's true, that's just what I picture. However, a Swedish archaeologist recently came forward and claims that Beowulf originated as an oral tale 600 years earlier than that accepted truth the British scholars love so much, and he backs these claims up by historically verified details in the text. Places, burial rites, things like that. Things a monk in his dank, lonely room, one would think, would not know. Alas, the only fact is, we don't know. And that's a shame, because this book is an important piece of literature to the Western world, and fantasy readers would be on familiar ground with this story. J.R.R. Tolkien was obsessed with Beowulf, and I can't imagine that shocks anybody who's read him. He even wrote a translation to the work that's not at all easy to read. The copy that I like to read is Seamus Heaney's translation that was put out in 2001. I have the bilingual edition that has both modern English and Old English. I'll talk more about Old English later when we talk about the Canterbury Tales, but I have a real love-hate relationship with Old English. I had an English professor in college who assigned us to read the Canterbury Tales in Old English, and that, quote, "It won't be a big deal, you'll be fine," end quote. Spoiler, we were fine, but just barely. For now, Seamus Heaney wrote a really great and easily readable version of Beowulf. Anybody can pick this up and understand what's going on. As always, there will be a link in the show notes over to caseforclassics.com giving info on this version. I really appreciate a scholar that works to make a classic available and digestible to the masses. It's helped me a lot in my life as a curious reader. Okay, let's get into the book. A little note here, and I'm going to reiterate this in various episodes where it's called for, so please bear with me. Please don't message me screaming about my pronunciations of some of these words. I am but a simple woman. I'm just merely familiar with these names. What I'm leaning on is the expertise of my college professors, people more learned and skilled than myself. I'm going to pronounce these words the way my professors did. Besides, even among scholars, the words are pronounced differently. So, please don't yell at the podcaster. Beowulf is a hero story about Beowulf. He's a tough guy, supernaturally so, who goes around performing heroic burdens and telling everybody how great he is. What, you're not familiar with boastful heroes? Then buckle in and prepare to get buttered up by the most boastful man ever put to paper. It's actually a thing called Cymbel. In the book, poem, epic, there are big banquets held where there's a ritual drinking of mead from a sacred horn, and there's feasting and boasting. There are also taunts and mockery, and it, i.e. Cymbel, was all meant to bind the attendants, usually warriors, together. Beowulf is the best boaster of all, and he is able to easily swipe away the taunts and mockeries of the men who challenge him. I mean, the tale is named after him. You don't need to guess that Beowulf is just easily the best at everything and will never, ever in a million years let anybody forget it. I'm spreading it on a little thick. But then, Beowulf proves himself. Where others have failed many, many times, Beowulf easily prevails. I don't want to give too much away, and I will never assume that you've already read this, so I'll try my best to go easy on the spoilers. Our first monster in this tale is Grendel. Grendel is described in the text as from the clan of Cain, and therefore cursed by God. To quote the text, Grendel was the name of this grim demon haunting the marches, marauding round the heath and the desolate fens. He had dwelt for a time in the misery among the banished monsters, Cain's clan, whom the Creator had outlawed and condemned as outcasts for the killing of Abel. The Eternal Lord had exacted a price. Cain got no good from committing that murder because the Almighty made him anathema, and out of the curse of his exile there sprang ogres and elves and evil phantoms and the giants too, who strove with God time and again until he gave them their reward. He's a monster. Not like a person who leaves jelly in the peanut butter jar monster. No, he's an actual physical monster. And he's been having himself a good time breaking into the kingdom of Hrothgar and eating the men. And they can't do anything about it. You see, the thing about being cursed under God and all that, you tend to be invincible to man-made weapons. So that's a big hindrance to Hrothgar's efforts to get Grendel taken care of. I'm going to allow you to let your mind wander on whether or not Beowulf is successful in his encounter with Grendel. It's a hero's journey, so 2 + 2 = 4, right? Well, it turns out Grendel wasn't the scariest thing stomping around Hrothgar's place. Grendel had a mother, and she gets pretty peeved that her baby boy has been attacked. She starts causing problems and giving those brave warriors nightmare fodder for the rest of their lives, and it becomes apparent that Beowulf's services are again needed. A little note about the action of fight scenes in this story. They're surprisingly violent and gory. It's detailed and, okay, maybe it's not up to Tarantino standards, but for a classical piece of literature, it's a little jarring to read some of these things. And you know I love it. Anyway, there's no need to be delicate when describing the glorious slaughter of monsters, creatures cursed by God. Remember, regardless of who first came up with this tale, the version we read today was written by a monk, and I'm sure you can see his religious little fingerprints all over this. It happens at the end of the book too, these Christian parallels. If I weren't afraid of spoilers, I'd tell you what they are, but I'd ruin the ending. Maybe once you've read it, get on the A Case for Classics Facebook page and start a discussion. It's all pretty blatant and easy to find in the text. Alright, we've got Beowulf. Hero supreme, boaster of God, and defeater of the vile beasts that roamed the earth, cursed and hungry for man-flesh. What does he do when he leaves Hrothgar's kingdom? Well, he goes back to his home kingdom, and to his lord Hygelac, from whom Beowulf eventually inherits a kingdom. Then we get treated to getting to read about Beowulf's retelling of his adventures in Hrothgar's kingdom. Like we weren't just there. All of it. I don't know why. There are a few things in this tale that make the story not so adrenaline-fueled. We get treated to poems, songs, and tales of heroes long past who are not characters in this tale, and if you're not looking them up, you won't know who they are. I wish I could tell you that it's only a tiny bit of space dedicated to this hero worship, but it's kind of sprinkled throughout. But if you get through them, you're rewarded. There's always a great action scene after. Besides, a hero's tale needs lots of heroics, and tales of heroics within a tale of heroism is kind of meta, and I'm not really mad about it. I could keep being vague about beat-by-beat points in the tale of Beowulf, but it's time to move on to my actual case. Why? Why should you read Beowulf? Alright, it's a male power fantasy. The only interesting female is Grendel's mother, and you're forced to live through poems and tales of people who you don't even know who the heck they are. What could possibly be gotten from giving your precious time to this tale? My friends, I've come with good tidings of great news. Beowulf, being an epic poem, is actually a quick read. This isn't something that'll take weeks to read. I read it in an evening this time around to make my notes for this episode. It was my third reading, and I already knew a lot of the beats, so give yourself 2, maybe 3 evenings to finish it. If you're like me, and you feel very virtuous and grown up when you accomplish something, don't judge me. This will make you flush with happiness when you've finished it. Aside from the swiftness in which you will finish this, I also must insist that it's worth nearly every second you spend reading it. This is a story of men growing past the glories of their youth and looking at their lives as they are, in weariness and sadness. Beowulf begins the tale, a young hero in his prime, wowing the masses with his superhuman feats, and he ends the tale 50 years later, remembering words said to him by a very tired Hrothgar. He wins his battles and fulfills his boasts, but worse than the monsters are the exhaustive fallouts of the battles, the things that fall into the empty spaces he leaves in his wake. And even if all that he vacates is a spot inhabited by a monster, there's still a void there, a place for something else to grow into. And those kinds of things always end up turning on you and biting you in the butt. Spoiler alert, although Beowulf is always a hero, he definitely gets bitten in the butt. Maybe even literally. The tale doesn't have a happy ending. Rather a sort of cold, dark, life goes on kind of ending. Glory burns bright and golden, then sputters to gray, dusty ash, picked up in soft winds and carried off to places where it will be forgotten. Nothing lasts. Okay, movie time. Oh, I'm pumped for this one because I've actually seen a Beowulf movie, and that horrific pile of garbage is a perfect example for why I avoid movie adaptations. You know what? I'm just going to put a link on the show notes about all of the adaptations because I keep seeing based loosely on, which tells me all I need to know. I do want to talk about the 2007 CGI animated film. It's garbage. Oh my god, it is garbage. This movie is terrible. Folks, they made Grendel's mother a weird Angelina Jolie succubus monster with built-in bones coming out of her feet that make it look like high-heeled shoes. Garbage with obviously no female input. Trash. I hate movie adaptations and I hate CGI Angelina Jolie sex monsters. If you read the actual poem and acquaint yourself with the monstrous beauty of the freaking terrifying character of Grendel's mother, as I previously stated as being the only interesting female character, you'll understand why I'm so incensed with that garbage depiction. Throw away the whole movie. I'm okay. There's lots of caps lock going on my notes, but I'm going to be fine. And I hope someday to get to a place where all memories of that movie are erased from my mind. I'm going to end this on a quote from the book that I think does a really good job of encompassing Beowulf as a character. It's Beowulf speaking to Hrothgar after Grendel's mother snuck into the meat house, Heorot, and killed one of Hrothgar's dearest friends. Wise sir, do not grieve. It is always better to avenge dear ones than indulge in mourning. For every one of us living in this world means waiting for our end. Let whoever can win glory before death. When a warrior is gone, that will be his best and only bulwark. Beowulf lives by that philosophy until the end. Even in his old age, with weariness weighing him down, and the inevitable very well known to him, he never wavers in this thinking. Pig-headed? Perhaps. But I can't help but admire that steadfastness of spirit. Stubbornness maybe isn't the best quality in all people, but in a mythic hero, you bet your butt it's a good quality. So give this culturally important tale a read, and then come talk to me about it. And that's the case for this week. I hope I inspired you to pick up a new book. If you'd like to hear more from me, I co-host a horror-related podcast called The Ghostwriters Podcast with authors Mary San Giovanni and Matt Wilderson. Find me on social media. The show has a Facebook page and a Twitter account. Just search for A Case for Classics. Do you have something nice to say? Get in touch. acaseforclassics.com is the best place for that. I have no options for you if you have mean things to say. Just please don't. If you enjoyed this show, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or any other streaming service you use. It would really help the show, and we can talk books to a bigger audience. A Case for Classics is written, narrated, and edited by me, Summer Cannon. Thanks for listening, and I hope you tune in for another case next week.